Hey guys, Joe Miles here with Osseo Gear, and we're doing kind of our final heavy era versus light era test. We've done quite a bit of this, but we've come up with a new kind of system that we're going to try out here that kind of, in my mind, or it will alleviate any doubt that we have. This topic is debated endlessly online. And to start with, we don't have any sponsors. We're not paid to push any product. You know, we're not paid to say heavier stuff is better. We're not paid to say lighter stuff is better. We have no dog in the fight, not sponsored by anybody, not making money off of this. I truly want to know what's going to give me the most advantage as a whitetail bow hunter. If it's a 900 grain arrow, that's going to give me the most advantage to whitetail hunting. That's what I want to have because I'm trying to stack the deck in my favor. If it's a 300 grain arrow, that's what I'm going to shoot. So here are the arrows that we have. We've got the DCA Hunters, and we have a 450 grain arrow, and we have a 650 grain arrow, and we have 3 of each. These arrows have been nock tuned, they've been spine aligned, and they're, again, exactly the same diameter. Obviously, there's more weight in the heavier 650 grain arrow, and we used Ethics archery components to get there. That was a chore, just being able to build a 650 grain arrow and a 450 grain arrow that would tune correctly out of a 60-pound bow and a 70-pound bow. Those are the pound weights that we'll be shooting out of our bow here. So the arrows are dialed, they are ready to go, they are super tuned, so there won't be any issues there, and they are the same exact diameter. Same fletching, silent night fletchings, same nocks, and as you can see right here, they've been nock tuned. So that's the arrow that we're going to use, and we're going to be doing 3 tests. We're going to test speed, we're going to test trajectory, and we're going to test penetration with the 450 grain arrow versus the 650 grain arrow. The bow that we're going to be shooting is the Mathews VXR 29-inch draw. At 70 pounds, we've got the 70-pound mods in there right now, so we'll sight in the 450 grain arrows with this sight, and then we'll re-sight in the 650 grain arrows and shoot those. We'll change the mods out and put in the 60-pound mods, and we'll do the exact same thing. So it's always apples to apples. There's no funny business going on. We want to know the actual results. Guys talk about speed, and I hear it all the time that speed's not important, but I couldn't disagree more with that. If I've got an animal standing at 30 yards and I've got an arrow that gets there 50 feet per second faster than another, if that deer is reacting to the shot, that has to give me an advantage. So speed, it's not the only thing, but it is important to consider when setting up your arrow setup. Secondly will be our trajectory test. And what we're going to do here is we're going to shoot 20 yards, 40 yards, and 60 yards, and we're going to have paper in between at exactly the 50% mark. So at the 20-yard shot, we'll have paper at 10 yards. At the 40-yard shot, we'll have paper at 20 yards, and at the 60-yard shot, we'll have paper at 30. And we're going to see the trajectory, like if there was a limb or brush at the halfway point, how much better is the trajectory in the faster, lighter arrow? Is it that much? We'll see. I mean, my guess is at 20 yards, it's not going to be that big a difference, and at 60 yards, it's going to be a heck of a lot of difference. But we'll see, because that also is important when setting up your arrow selection. The speed's important, the trajectory you get out of it, and then finally, probably the most debated topic is the penetration of the arrow. We've been doing quite a few tests, and so far I have not seen that great of a difference between a 650 grain arrow and a 450 grain arrow shooting out of the same bow. I haven't seen that big of a difference, but here's what we're going to test it on. And I get these comments all the time about we're not hunting cardboard, we're not hunting plyboard, but it goes back to bone. I hear, okay, the heavy arrow is not going to penetrate as well into a foam target or into cardboard, but it does better on bone. I don't understand that. If I had a 40-inch thick piece of bone and it was a consistent medium, the penetration, you would be able to measure it. I think the reason people argue that bone is because that's not quantifiable. I mean, if you lay a dead buffalo out there or a dead cow and you shoot 30 arrows into him, you're going to hit that animal 30 different ways. You know, part of your broadhead or arrow will hit a rib bone. The next one won't hit any rib bone. One will hit flat into the scapula. The other one will just hit the edge of the scapula. So you can't get quantifiable data that way. So we'll start by shooting, figuring out the speeds at 3 feet, and then actually the speed at the target. So we can see the diminishing in the speed of the arrows. So there's a whole lot going on here. Real quick, before we start the test, the penetration test, this is what we've developed, and it is taking a lot of time and effort. Kevin behind the camera right now is the guy that built these, and we came up with this. We've got hide on the outside, we've got 1 inch thick piece of insulation, then we've got a piece of 1/4 inch plyboard, or it's 1/8 inch. What is it, Kev? Quarter inch plyboard. Then we've obviously got cardboard, and then this entire thing is full of Jello. We got Jello wrestling. Kevin does a lot of Jello wrestling on the weekends, so we just borrowed some of his Jello to fill these up. But I thought that was pretty cool. A cool idea was, you know, it's kind of like the insides of an animal with the Jello, and then the opposite side again is the same thing. So this is really, it's the thickness of a large male whitetail, and then you've got hide, you've got insulation, you've got like what would be a rib bone or a scapula, then you've got cardboard, and then you've got the Jello in the middle. So it's going to be interesting to see how this penetration test goes. We've got brand new, we've got 3 packs of these Magnus Stinger 100 grain broadheads to shoot through these targets, and then we'll do 650, 450 grains out of the 60 pounds and the 70 pounds, because the guys really wanted to see common bow weights. I personally shoot a little bit heavier bow weight, but got a lot of requests for common bow weights, so we went with 70 pounds and 60 pounds to see how it goes. So we're going to head back to the back now and get started on the test. But again, I hope this brings some value to you. I know I'm excited about it because, again, I want to shoot the absolute best possible arrow I can for white-tailed deer. .243, 20 yards, 450 grain arrow. The paper's at 10 yards. Bullseye. All right, 275. All right, 40 yards, paper's at 20. Everything set? .60 yards. All right, we got the penetration test with the 450 grain arrow, total arrow weight, shooting the Magnus broadhead.
70 pounds.
70 pound bow. Thank you, Kev. 29 inch draw. Sweating my baguettes off. all in
90 degrees.
95 degrees, 89% humidity, all in the name of science. We're just going to, since all the arrows are exactly the same length, we'll just measure how much is sticking out.
Okay.
15 and 1/4 inches exactly. 15 and 1/4. All right, 650 grain arrow, 20-yard trajectory and speed. All right, 40 yards. $60 yards, 650 grain arrow. All right, 650 grain total arrow weight, penetration test, 70-pound bow, 29-inch draw. It didn't even make it all the way through. Over 15 and a half.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, it's poke. I mean,
It's basically penetrated exactly the same.
you're right. It's poking the hide.
So neither one of them made it into the, neither one of them made it all the way to the foam. I guess the faster one poked in right there, and this one, the heavy one, didn't even make it all the way through. It's right there. I mean, so basically the same amount of penetration.
Yeah.
Basically the same amount. I mean, this was what, a 1/16 of an inch?
Yeah.
Let's measure it again.
I don't remember what the first one was.
The first one was 15 and 1/4. This is a little over 15 and a half. 15 and 5/8.
Yep.
15 and 5/8. 15 and 1/4, 15 and 5/8. But I mean, where's the heavy arrow difference?
I should have went halfway through this.
I mean, this is all the same stuff. It's hide, insulation, a slat board, plyboard, Jello, and cardboard. And it's exactly the same. There's Jello in the middle. There's not friction. There's nothing here. There's Jello. Kevin's Jello wrestling. The heavy one did not even make it all the way through. Anyway, we'll try it with that was with the 70-pound bow. We'll do it with the 60-pound bow tomorrow. But learning a lot. And guys, you're gonna have decisions to make on what's gonna be best for you for whitetail. You know, the only other thing really to test, and we'll probably do that next year now that hunting season started, is FOC. But that's the only other thing. And that's what people are gonna argue on this, is they're gonna say, but the FOC was the same. I think the heavy arrow had a little bit higher FOC. We'll obviously calculate that and put it in the reports. It's got a little heavier FOC. I think it was like 10 for the light and 14 for the heavy. So I know it had more FOC, and it still didn't penetrate as well. Okay. All right, guys. You know, we did the penetration test yesterday, the 650 and the 450 total arrow weight arrows, and kind of, I don't know that blown away is the right word for it, but surprised that the heavy arrow didn't penetrate better. So we're going to shoot them again, and this time we're going to shoot them into the exact same mold that we have. And I realize this is not an animal, but it is structured very similar to an animal. We've got hide, insulation, a little bit of plyboard, and then we've got Jello in the middle of the box. So it's a consistent medium, and it's very similar to an animal. So in my mind, the heavy arrow should be penetrating quite a bit more, and it didn't yesterday. It actually penetrated less. So we're going to do it again, 100% non-biased, same exact arrows, same exact diameter of the arrows, same exact length, shooting out of the same bow with brand new Magnus Stinger broadheads. Nothing that would alter anything other than the performance of the arrow. All right, starting out with the 650 grain.
20 yards.
20 yards. All right, 450, 20 yards. Did it again.
See here through.
450. We got 14.5 inches showing. 650. We got the same basically that we got yesterday. Just under 15.5.
15.38.
Yep.
Yep.
14.5. 15 3/8.
Call it 15.5. So we got an
inch better
with the lighter arrow.
with the lighter arrow. It actually came all the way through.
Huh. Very interesting.
Yep. Apples to apples. Exact same target. All right, let's do the 60. We're gonna do the 60-pound bow. We're gonna do the penetration test. We're not gonna do the trajectory test because our jig's not tall enough for that 650 grain arrow. So we'll extrapolate the math, but you really don't want to see us shoot again, so no big deal. But we will do the penetration test with the 60-pound bow. Okay, 60-pound bow, 650 grain arrow first, brand new Magnus Stinger broadhead, 29-inch draw, and then we're going to shoot the 450 into our mold with a consistent medium. All right, 450. Did it again. All right, here's the 450. 16. Here's the 550. 16 and an eighth. So much closer there. But obviously with heavier poundage, it's going to get amplified. Once again, 16 on the dot. You could call it a fuzz under 16. 16 and an eighth. So once again, the lighter, faster arrow penetrated better. Two different weights. We'll do a conclusion this afternoon and then wrap all this up. But pretty fascinating stuff that absolutely goes against the grain of what we've been told for the last year or last 30 years, really, with the modern compound bows. Again, no dog in the fight, not trying to prove anybody wrong, just want the best setup we possibly can get. And this was really eye-opening, and I know exactly what I'm going to be doing going forward. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I know what I'm doing.
All right, guys, we'll wrap this up here back in the office. All right, just for fun's sake, I guess, I've got a tri-pan that I shot through a buck the other night. It's used, the blade is slightly bent. Obviously the blades are pretty dull now, but I'm gonna shoot one into that same setup with my bow. It's a 74-pound, 29-inch draw, shooting these 470 grain rip TKOs at 304 feet per second. But I'm interested to see how it stacks up to the heavy arrow with a fixed blade head, and this is a mechanical. So, I mean, obviously it's 4 pounds more weight and a little bit faster than this one, but it's got a heavier arrow than the 450 grain arrow. So it's not apples to apples, but it's a fixed, I mean, it's a mechanical, I guess you could say, versus a fixed blade, but those were brand new fixed blades, and this is a used mechanical. Just want to see how it does as far as penetration. $16, so a half inch, just a half inch less.
You can feel the point right here.
Yeah. And that's a used broadhead. That's a used broadhead. I mean, surely it would gain some more if it hadn't been used, but we know that the mechanicals,
and it opened all the way too.
We know the mechanicals don't penetrate as well as the fixed. Nope. Which is fine. All right, guys, you saw earlier that we were doing the trajectory, that's a tough word for me to say for some reason, test, and with the 450 grain arrow, 70 pounds, 650 grain arrow, 70 pounds, and here are the results. And what I did was just draw a line. This was the 450 and this is the 650. So at 20 yards, you can see there's not a big difference. It's a little bit, but not much. 40 yards is a pretty significant amount, and then 60 yards is a pretty significant amount as well. So the moral of the story, if you had branches or brush in between you and the target, you know, when you start getting out to, you know, probably 30, 35, definitely 40, it can become a severe issue. If you're shooting 25 yards and in, it's not going to be much of an issue with a you know 650 grain arrow, but with the 70 grain, I mean with the 450 grain, you're definitely faster and you're definitely flatter. So that's what this is a real world example of how it actually looks at the midway point, which I think is something I really wanted to see. All right, guys, concluding this test, and I'm probably beating a dead horse, but I want to say it one more time. I have no dog in the fight. I'm not trying to prove anybody wrong. I'm not saying anything is right. You have to make the decision of what you want to do. I realize we aren't shooting boxes, we aren't hunting boxes in the back of a warehouse. I realize that. We're hunting animals, but we're kind of in a quandary because it's no way to get quantifiable data shooting an animal because you're going to hit him different every time. So we try to get a consistent medium and use that for our penetration test. As you saw, what we did is at the halfway point for the trajectory test, we set up paper to shoot through, which proved to be pretty difficult because you got the paper and then you've got the target, 20 or 30 yards further. So it made it challenging, but I think overall we showed the difference in the trajectory that if you're shooting a 650 grain arrow and you're at 20, 25 yards, you're going to be pretty close to the same. It's going to be off a little bit, but once you start getting out past that, especially 35, 40, and on, it becomes a huge difference. So if you're in the timber and you've got brush in between you and you're trying to make a 35-yard shot, you definitely have an advantage with the flatter shooting arrow as far as trajectory. You also, with the faster shooting arrow, you have an advantage to misjudging distance. In the heat of the moment, you've ranged a tree and it's 30 yards and he comes in behind it, you think it's 35, he's really 38. You got a much better chance of hitting him in the vitals with a faster, flatter shooting arrow. Another thing that I noticed, and I probably need to test it more, with the 650, when it shot at the further ranges, I could really hear it. I could hear the hiss, and I think it's because the arrow is in flight longer, so maybe it was just the fact that I could hear it longer, but that was something that I noticed. I was really expecting the heavy arrow to penetrate better, and it didn't. It actually penetrated worse. I know it's not bone. If we had a 40-inch thick piece of bone, we'd be able to try that, but we don't have one of those. So this was, to us, a real replica of what an animal is made up of. The hide on the outside, the insulation is the muscle, the plyboard is the scapula, and then the jello in the middle. So I think it was a real good example of a consistent medium to shoot into. And the heavy arrow just did not do any better. I mean, they were very, very close, but I was expecting it to do a lot better. So in essence, I can't see any reason to shoot the heavy arrow. It's not penetrating any better. It's not shooting as flat. It's not getting to the animal any faster. That's something else we should cover real quick. I mean, at 3 feet, it's 44 feet per second slower. At 20 yards, it's, wait, I got my numbers wrong. Hang on a second. Yeah, at 3 feet is 44 feet per second slower. At 40 yards is 41 feet per second slower. And at 60 yards is 40 feet per second slower. Now, all whitetails react differently. Some are going to jump the string real fast. Some are not going to jump it as fast. But you can't tell me that if you're shooting an animal at 40 yards and my arrow is getting there 40 feet per second quicker, I don't have a better chance of hitting him in the vitals. So for whitetail deer hunting, I'm going to wrap this up because I'm being kind of long-winded here. For whitetail deer hunting, I don't think a 650 grain arrow is the way to go. I don't think the heavy arrows are the way to go. Personally, I'm shooting a 474 grain or a 470 grain arrow right now, and I'm actually probably going to back that down next year to the 400 to 420 range, and then I can pull less poundage and still get the speeds I want. So in conclusion, I hope this information, shed some light. You again have to make your own decision on what you want to shoot, but I really think you ought to look heavy into the disadvantages to me of the heavy weighted arrow. I appreciate it, guys. Love to get your feedback. I know we're going to get blown up with a bunch of you're not shooting bone and that's where the heavy arrow performs better, but you know, it is what it is. Again, thanks a lot for checking out the videos. Any questions, comments, let us know, and good luck the rest of the season, guys.